Hello there, I am Man in Yellow and welcome back to another high ranked game review video. In this one we will be looking at a game between Shadowforce and Zafry, and Shadowforce will obviously be going first here. The reason why I wanted to feature this one is because we see a couple pretty interesting things, and more than anything else we see Phantom, which is something that you kind of need to learn to play around if you're going to be playing at high ranks. Probably also need to know how to use it if you're playing at high ranks because you really want that phobie. Phantom is, in my opinion, among the big three phobies right now, which are Billy, Doc Holiday and Phantom. Those three are just broken as win conditions. They are very powerful and do things that probably shouldn't be allowed. So they are phobies you will be seeing a lot if you are playing against serious high rank players. And we also have Le Shovel, which I believe there is also some of in this map. That is kind of on the same level as those three, but it's a little bit different because it's not a win condition in the same way. It's more of a supporting unit that helps your win condition become better. I guess you can kind of argue that Phantom is in a bit of that same category, but I would say it's a little bit different because it's like higher cost and you are putting a bit more effort into making it work, whereas the shovel just kind of works with whatever. Anyway, though, the opener we get here is a 1-key with Jellyfish. I almost forgot the name there. Jellyfish is a pretty good phobie on a map like this. It's actually a pretty good phobie on a lot of large maps as long as flyers are good, and like early flyers are good. Pretty much anywhere where you might want to go for a Tooth Fairy or Murderwing, it can be pretty good as an opener because it allows you to cheat keys early on, which can matter a lot if you play for tempo, and it can also just help you assemble a very strong board a little bit faster sometimes. So I think it's a pretty good phobia, and it's not that much weaker than a Tooth Fairy. It's a decent bit weaker, but it's not insanely much weaker. The reason why ranged flyers are pretty good on this map, and especially those lower cost ones, is because you can fly over here and start hitting the enemy hard. And if they try and pressure you away, you just fly over here and you're usually relatively safe because you have phobies standing around here most of the time. So that is pretty good. Also just means that you are able to hard rush the opponent very early on, and it's just also good at defending these points on the first couple turns. So it makes a lot of sense. You'll very often see it here, especially if you are going for a faster strategy. Something that I have seen a lot of people do is go Speedola after this. Usually when you see Jellyfish, it's because you want to bank to a 6-key, or because you are playing for some kind of tempo thing, or just that you are, kind of trying to accumulate keys so that you can overwhelm your opponent in the mid game. But very often it's because you want a 6-key on turn 2 and you still want a flyer with range and a 1-key on turn 1. So you use it on maps where you want a puff on turn 2. You can sometimes use it on maps where you want Speedola turn 2, and this is a map where you could do that on if you want to. So there are a lot of different things that this could mean. I believe they go actually innocuous into a 6-key if I remember correctly, which is kind of like the mid-game thing I talked about, where they have a bit more keys in the mid-game so they can maybe win those skirmishes there. It makes a decent amount of sense because otherwise this would just be a Murderwing and it wouldn't really be that much more powerful. It would have more burst damage, but that's really all there would be to it. Or it would be a Tooth Fairy, which would just have a bit more stats both in attack and health. But having the extra keys can be pretty valuable. So I see why they choose that over either of those here. Get a pretty common counter opener from Zafry here. The Ginsting always makes a lot of sense if the opponent is going for stuff like Cassowary, Murderwing, Jammy, well, not really the Tooth Fairy, but Jellyfish also, which is what we are seeing here. Lots of 1-keys and stuff like that. It does pretty well into those. That's kind of what Ginsting is made for, as it's just the cheapest 2 movement, 2 range attacker you can get, and having a mobile 2 range attacker is just very good against those phobies because you kind of get to bully them. I guess you can also get Spot, but Spot is not very well statted. It has a little up instead, whereas this actually has pretty decent stats, and it also has the AoE on top, which makes Ginseng pretty good at dealing with those small phobies. You also see another banked 6 keys here. This is possibly because if Shadowforce goes for a 6 key, maybe Zafry wants to either mirror it or bring their own 6 key to kind of like have as much power in a big phobie in the same way, because there is a lot of very powerful 6 keys in this game. There's like Puff, Hematic Ginseng, Spidolas, probably a lot more than that. Those were just the first couple ones that pop up in my head when I think about this map. So often you really like getting 6 keys here. But Shadowforce ends up going for a Inoculus and banking here. I believe they go for a Hematic next turn, and they are going for the Inoculus early here just because they want to get it out onto the map. It takes a bit longer to go out here than a Hematic would, obviously. So that makes sense. What I don't think makes any sense is I would have expected this Jammies to go down here. I'm not sure why that didn't happen, to be honest, because like there's no reason that couldn't happen here. I guess it means that the middle point would be a bit harder to defend, but that's still not really a problem, I don't think, because this could just move forward and hit, and then you could hit it with the Jammies or with your Razor Mouth, and you would still be able to kill a 1 key there. If they put the Ginseng there, you can also hit it, and your Jammies would just go on there hard, so you wouldn't really be too sad about that, I don't think. You could also just like fight it if they actually put it here. Like you could straight up run at them with like all of your phobies, essentially, with the Razor Mouth and the Tooth Fairy and this, and then bring a large phobie besides that, and you could maybe like rush to kill the Ginseng. So I think there was some merit in taking this. I think they're doing it maybe because they want to hold this middle point, which people often fight over. They want the Jammies to be in range so that it can kill the Razor Mouth if it goes here, or the Ginseng if it goes there. But I'm not sure if that's actually worth it, because I think just taking that point is pretty good, while you can do it very safely. And yeah, we see the Hematic here, and the Ginseng just moves up here to take the point. Ginseng up here to take a point or any like ranged AoE phobia is pretty good because you're in range of the stim pad. So that is usually something you see pretty often. And Hematic is also something you see pretty often here because it's just a very, very good fighter. This is one of the best like statted phobies in the game, and it has a big AoE ability. So you really like using that for phobie combat. And we will also see it mirrored here. We get to see Jammies move down. This is actually something I have seen a couple times done with Murder Wings mostly, and sometimes Tooth Fairies. I don't think I've seen it with a Jammies before, but people would sometimes go for the 3 key out here to hold the middle point, then they fly down here with their aggressive like 3 range flyer, and they've taken this point on the turn before with their 1 key, then they like go out here with a bunch of 1 keys and maybe some aggressive 2 keys, either like a cassowary double 1 key or just straight up 4 1 keys, and then they go Spidola next turn and they just super rush the heart while taking all of the points. I've seen that before. This is a little bit more like conservative, or however you want to call it, in that you're just putting the Jammies down here while you're building a strong team on the other side. But this is still pretty annoying for Zafry because they kind of have to deal with this thing, because eventually this damage does add up. Like, even though it's only 500 damage at attack, that's 1000 damage every turn, which means you're killing them in 9 turns. And realistically, if you get like 4 or 5 hits in, you are going to be able to finish them. So it's really killing them a bit faster than that, which means you are forced to respond to it at some point here. Again, we are seeing very similar phobies. There's an Inoculus coming out. So we have Hematics, Inoculuses, some 1 keys, and then there's a variation in like which 2 range movement thing you chose, because Zafry starts with more keys. That's kind of the reason why this is all that different. So very similar game plans here in the beginning. Get the free hit on the Razor Mouth, which I think is correct. You could also have hit the heart if you wanted to, depending on whether you think you're going to go into like heavy combat, or if this will just be used to take a point with. We see some movement here. This is just moving further into the map so that it has like a bigger zone, because it's not actually in danger up here right now. Can't be hit by this and the other Jinsting at the same time, and this is out of range. So this is just free to hold a very large area here. And then this moves down a little bit just to support the jammy fish, just in case this would move over to hit. This had to be one tile further up on the turn before though, because otherwise it wouldn't help defend the, what's it called, Inoculus as much. That was the reason why it was one tile further up on the last turn. And then we see the Stabby, which is just a good phobia on this map most of the time. It's a little bit slow, but it also works really well on maps with healing spas, and it's just generally a pretty nice phobia. And here we see the first Phantom. There will also be a Phantom on Shadowforce's side. And this phobia is just incredibly powerful. When you use this, like in the perfect use case, you can still move phobies 5 tiles essentially, I believe it is, if I remember correctly. Because you can, it's not just that you're moving something to here, which is what makes it seem fine at first, but like let's say that the Phantom is sitting here and there's another phobia sitting somewhere out here, right? You can walk up here, then you can pull something from here, put it here. That is a lot of movement. It's easier to see if you like put that in a straight line or something. So if we like imagine that this is a phobia right here, then the Phantom can pull that phobia while it's standing here, and you're moving it from here to all the way over here, which is a very big teleport, obviously. Like that is essentially like 3 move teleport without spending an action, which is very, very strong. It used to be way more powerful back when it was 3, like that was ridiculous, but it's still very, very, very strong. And if you then, move your phobia once, you have the 5 tiles range on whatever you're using this with. And often you are using it with Kaboom or Blondie or something like that. And that is very, very powerful, obviously, because you just have a damage zone that you basically cannot avoid. Like if we just say that there's a Kaboom sitting out here somewhere, right? Like this walks forward, teleports the Kaboom here, then the Kaboom walks here and it blows up here. Like, you can stand on this tile and blow up a team that's back here. That is kind of ridiculous. That's not what ends up happening in this case, because neither player is going to be bringing Kaboom here. But it just says something about like how ridiculous the range on the Phantom is. It's pretty much impossible to avoid completely. Most of the time people try and block it, or they spread out instead. You just instantly see the mirrored Phantom and then some more keys gained through the Jammy-fish. Also, you can see they still haven't been able to take this point because they didn't take it early game. Would have been pretty good to take, I think. But maybe they would have lost middle control or whatever. I don't know. I think they would have been able to play tempo if Zafry did that though. We also see the Smiley response, which I don't super love here because there's an Inoculus out. But on the other hand, you do have like 2 dimensionals that are very good to hit, and one of them is a slow one. It's also pretty nice against this because you don't really want to AoE then in some cases. Like, it's fine, I guess, but this isn't super exciting. It does threaten pretty hard right now, or like pretty well right now, because the Phantom can just teleport it out here straight away, and then it could move twice and it would already be in action very, very quickly. But I feel like there are probably better things you could bring, to be honest. Like, I feel like just bringing a Blondie would be stronger. Kaboom if they have it. I don't know if Zafry has a Kaboom, but something like that could be more powerful in my opinion in this case. But like I said, this is also fine. I just think there are probably slightly better options. I'm not a huge fan of using Phantom with Smiley unless it's as a surprise attack when the opponent tries to group up on the Phantom and you just put a Smiley in the middle of them directly from the vault as you run away. Then it kind of makes sense. But most of the time I think it's better if you want to use Smiley, you should just use it with either Petals or a Le Shovel, and most of the time the Shovel is just the best choice, because you don't really need to like move it that many spaces for it to like connect with something valuable most of the time, especially not since they have buffed this so much that it actually has a very high amount of health now. Which wasn't a good buff, by the way. That was bad balance design, but that's a different discussion, because Smiley definitely wasn't weak. Here we see the Blondie come out. This is one of the very common used phobies with a Phantom. Blondie and Kaboom are the big ones. Sometimes you will see some like 100% AoE phobies be used with it. For example, Hevo 3.0 or Noxious could be used with it. I have actually also seen someone use Boss with it, but I don't think that's that good. Where they would like walk up with the Boss, do a big hit, and then pull it back with the Phantom. But I think that's a pretty weird thing to set up, and I also don't think it's even that great, because Boss's main thing is to burn opponents while you are in combat. So you actually want to like keep the pressure on them so that they are forced to stay in the fire most of the time when you are playing Boss, at least in my experience. So I don't think those two work that well together, but I mean, anything works really well with this as long as it's like a big AoE hit. That's kind of what you're looking for. Or some super hard to hit but very high value ability. Also works fairly well with it at times. Okay, here we see the one key kill up here, and then the recapture down here, or not recapture, but first capture of the middle point down here. It would have been better if they could have taken this point up here with the one key, because this wasn't taken before, but it was out of range of the Razor Mouth obviously, so they were kind of forced to go for the middle point. And then other than that, we just see some movement around here with bringing the Smiley further into the map along with the Phantom so that you can more easily connect it with something. They are trying to threaten a double disease on these two phobies. That's kind of their goal at this point. They want to disease the Phantom so that it dies, because it dies fairly quickly, and that would force the opponent into maybe doing a bad Phantom play, because, well, the Phantom is kind of like on a clock or whatever you want to say. So that is the idea with bringing the Smiley closer here. Then we also see a Rusty, and Rusty is a very common phobie brought against the Blondie, because if you teleport the Blondie in and then it gets rusty and you just stand in a circle around it and hit it, then the Blondie isn't really that effective. At least it like just ends up soaking up some damage and not much else, and like saving some turns, because it's obviously still depowering the opponent, so maybe you can go in at the same time, but it does reduce like the value of the Blondie very massively with just a one key. The only problem with this is that this is not that powerful a phobie, so right now they kind of needed something stronger, I think, because maybe they end up being comboed this turn. In theory, like this turn they could actually walk up and put the Blondie here and then, you know, move up and do stuff. Well, they would put it here and then it would move here, do a big debuff, and be pretty scary. They would probably put it here actually, so it's not in range of this, but whatever. Like they could go in with the Blondie this turn, so I'm a bit surprised to see this Rusty here. But on the other hand, if the Rusty is used to stop the Blondie, then they could summon something to hit the Blondie maybe, so it's not that bad, but I would have expected to see something a bit more powerful on that turn. You just see some more keys being saved up, and then the Blondie obviously starts moving forward. And you can also see that Shadowforce is doing something pretty clever here, in that they are spreading up in a way that makes it pretty awkward for the Smiley to get a good disease. So now this is in the middle here, so you can never disease these two at the same time right now. They are like, there's a mech in the middle and they are too far apart. So that means you aren't getting that dream disease that you really want there, even if you use the Phantom. And they could get a disease up here, But first of all, that's not very high phantom value. Like you would have to move it over here and then teleport it here just to move here. That's not fantastic. Maybe they move it here even. That's not a super good phantom, and you would end up getting punished pretty hard by this Blondie right after if you did that. And second of all, even if you disease these two, it's actually not that good of a trade, because these will probably be able to get more value before they die. Like, let's say this goes in here and does the disease thing, then they kill the smiley, then this probably moves onto this to take the panic point, and this gets to fight up here, because there will be a skirmish if that happened, and it would probably get more value, like overall, than you would lose from the smiley diseasing you. So I don't think that is really a concern, even though you are hitting a 6 key and a 3 key, which sounds pretty good, but it's not really that good here. We get the shovel out here, which makes a lot of sense because of the enemy Rusty. You kind of need a shovel if the opponent is bringing Rusty into your Blondie, even if you have a Phantom, because the Phantom is used to put this into the middle of the enemy team, and then this is like used to still keep the Blondie at threat, even if it gets Rustied. So it makes a fair bit of sense here, even though it feels, again, somewhat bad to bring a 3 key here when you have 9 keys in the bank. But it's also fine, because this is like a very, very powerful 3 key. Also, sorry if the screen just turned black there for a second. I think my second monitor disconnected for a second. It's like a loose connection. Okay, and here we just see some movement around, and we see the Willy Wonka. I think that's what this is called, or something like that, right? Something with Willy. Buffalo Will, whatever. There was a will in there. This thing is very interesting as a phobia, because they obviously made it way underpowered because they are scared of the control mechanic, which is a good thing, by the way. That is a good design decision, because if a control and enemy ability is like super meta, that is extremely unfun to play against. Like, if it's a very strong and very common ability, it makes the game feel terrible to play. So that is a good thing that they made it kind of weak. It pretty much requires you to use Phantom, and often you even want more on top of Phantom, which is quite wild, because like Phantom moves you so far. But this is a thing that is always used with Phantom, if it is used ever. It's kind of a meme phobia, but it can also totally win games, so it's not really that big of a meme. I personally am not a big fan of it, but I think it can work, and I have lost to it before, where it's stolen like a large phobia and I haven't been able to like wait it out or fight back properly, and that can very easily end the game if you are not careful. So it's a very threatening thing, but the big problem with it is just that it is so hard to connect. Even when you have a Phantom, it is pretty hard to connect. And we also see the Smiley move forward a little bit to just threaten them more without having to use the Phantom ability, which makes sense. We see a little bit of an aggressive move here by Shadowforce. Where they move forward with 2 phobies at the same time to take panic points. The reason why they're doing this is because they have to sacrifice a phobia at this point in the game. They are at 7 phobies, and these are both 3 keys that aren't really like insane combat wise. You want to replace at least one of them with a large phobia here, just to make your board a lot stronger. You also probably want to see if you can find some kind of counter to these things in here. Like, there are some things you can do against that. For example, you could bring in a freeze phobia maybe, so that if they ever use the combo to maybe steal your Blondie or steal your Hermetic or whatever, you can freeze your own phobia and wait it out. Just as a example. There are also a lot of other things they could bring. Something like a Leprechaun could maybe work. There's a lot of different options. They are definitely just looking to bring a better phobia than the Stabby, because at this point the Stabby is kind of like too weak to fight, and it's also a slow phobia. They probably want something with a bit more mobility here. So they're doing the usual thing where they're like, okay, I have to sacrifice a phobia, I'll put the stabby in here, which is fairly hard to kill. And then they also take the point down here at the same time. And the reason why taking the point down here at the same time is pretty good is because you are overloading the opponent with things to do. I also talked a bit about this in the last video where it was with, what's it called, Hoploy. And there was like a lot of cases where they got overloaded in like options because they didn't really have enough like actions to deal with all of the things that were going on. And that is just a very good thing to do if you can do it without like losing a lot of stuff. Because right here, if you kill the stabby, killing this at the same time is kind of rough to do. And that is something you want to look out for if you can do most of the time, because that is a very good thing. This drawing tool is seriously annoying me, but there's like no good drawing tools for this kind of thing. Also, I'm not sure if they really had to move this far back with these phobies, to be honest, but they are scared of this like coming in somehow and diseasing them, I would guess. To be honest, I think this phantom could still just have sat here on the healing spot with the shovel in front of it, unless I'm completely missing out on something. But like, even if this moves down here and teleports the smiley, it's not getting there, I don't think. Like, maybe it could actually. Moves here, puts the smiley here, then moves here. Yeah, it actually could, so it makes sense to move these back. Overall, they're just like making sure that the smiley doesn't get free value while still hitting it and stuff. And then they're taking the points, obviously. Here we see the rust he used on the jammy-fish, which I, on the one hand, don't think is worth it, but on the other hand, they need the unit slots, so it makes perfect sense to do. Also, that is a very cool animation for stealing a phobie. And we get a Yeti. That is like... This is like a board that is made to control the opponent while the smiley does its work, right? So we have... Like, if we just look at the board, we have the usual long-range one. Then we have 2 efficient attackers to kill things. We have this combo with the Waffalo Will that can steal an enemy phobie, which essentially forces the opponent to sometimes kill their own phobie, but it can also just like stall for time in some cases. Then we have another phobie that stalls for time here by freezing something, or just gives you an advantage in combat of some form. And then we have a phobie that really likes it when a lot of time passes, because like this diseases some things, and then like you just wait for the disease to do the work, right? So this is kind of like a lineup that wants this smiley to disease 1 or 2 things, and then you go in on the things that aren't diseased and you steal one of them, and you maybe freeze another phobie, and suddenly the opponent has like 1 or 2 phobies left that aren't either dying or already like unable to move or have any actions. So it's kind of like essentially like a just a team that kind of wants to disable the opponent, I guess you could say. I think there's a correct word for that, but I can't remember the word. English isn't my first language, so... But that's like what this kind of team is trying to do, I think. I will say Yeti, when the opponent has this many keys, is a bit questionable though, because there could be a Billy waiting, there could be a Sizzle waiting, there could be a Puff waiting behind the doors, a boss, whatever. Some kind of fire phobia, and that makes this a lot less effective. Also, we saw them take the point with the smiley there, which is 100% correct. And now, since this phantom has used the ability and it is a fairly long cooldown, there's also this one is gone. the ability on that is gone, they don't really have to fear the opponent's range anymore, because there isn't actually anything that can hit the enemy here, except this Ginsting can obviously kill this Jammy-fish. But like, this can't hit anything. This would have to walk up into melee range to hit something. This isn't in range of anything. This is only in range of what it already has deceased, so it doesn't really help that it's in range of it. This could walk forward and freeze the Blondie, but then it would instantly be unfrozen and it would be teleported forward and kill the Yeti probably, or it would just like power them all down and hit stuff. So this is a board where it's very hard for Zafry to actually fight back in any meaningful way outside of just killing this like Jammy-fish and then backing off with everything, which is pretty scary. Now they did get to like kill the Stabby for free essentially that way, and they also took the panic point for free, so it's not like it's terrible for them, but it still looks pretty bad at this point, because like, how do you fight back without like running into this Blondie and just dying? It's very hard to do. This is probably the best option. They actually do a pretty clever use of the smiley here, which is they have kind of realized that the smiley at this point is pretty useless. Like, it has already deceased this thing. It's not gonna decease this. They're probably never going to decease either of these. So that just means like you can only ever decease maybe the snake at best. And that is going to be like too hard to do for like it to be realistic. So they're just using it to body block for their other phobies here and to body block this thing, which makes a lot of sense. They could still unfreeze this if they want to, but that's like, then it takes the Phantom and stuff, so not necessarily that good. The only thing here that I didn't really like that they were doing is, I think they should have killed this thing. The reason they're not killing that, I assume, is because they don't want Shadowforce to have access to a 4 key from their vault. But they could like just have hit this and then move back here in theory. And like, yeah, you can kill the Ginsting then with like teleporting with Phantom, but you're not gonna do that. So I think they should probably just have killed the Jammy-fish, because otherwise this Jammy-fish will actually gain value again next turn. Like, it will be able to fly out and hit something and have the pull be valuable and stuff. So I think they should probably have killed that, but otherwise this was likely Zafry's best option. Also, maybe they should have like placed the Phantom down here, but it's very hard to place their phobies against a Blondie with the ability up when they have no like ways of countering it at all. Like, they're kind of forced to split up in 2 groups, which is the power of Blondie. Here we see a big debuff on 3 phobies. A lot of movement forward to harm the opponent. With a little droney. This is just a fast phobie. They want something super fast and they want something mechanical, because otherwise it might just get deceased by this. This is probably just sitting still here. And this also helps in that it's blocking for the Phantom, so the Phantom isn't actually getting deceased here in any way. They would have to kill this droney, which is pretty much impossible for them to do. Like, this doesn't have enough attack power to do it, and this can't get near it. So this droney actually keeps the Phantom completely safe, which is pretty nice. And it's also just a fast, small attacker that can maybe hit something, which is pretty good here overall. I would say this was not the play that I expected them to do. They do get 3 debuffs here and some damage on this Yeti, but when I first watched this replay, I was almost certain they were going to go super aggressive here, but they just didn't, which is also a fine thing to do, I guess. But I would have thought they would have gone for something like super aggressive. Like, I thought they would move the shovel over here. Let me just see if I can be allowed to use this arrow tool. I think they would move the shovel over here, push the Blondie up here, then do 2 attacks on the Smiley to kill it, then use the Phantom to teleport the sizzle up and then unfreeze this or something like that. That was what I was thinking when I first saw this, because this big getting unfrozen is like 2k damage on this thing. So that's almost a kill on it, which is like very, very strong. But I can also see why they would rather like do the big debuff and just like hurt the phobies a bit while the Blondie is in a very good position. Because this would barely not die if they did that big turn, I believe. It would be alive with 150, 160 health-ish, something like that. So I can also see why they didn't really go for that play. But it just felt like it would have been a pretty decent option when I first saw it. Also, I thought they maybe would have just killed this thing. They could have also done that by like just teleporting this forward and then just murdering this thing, I guess. Like you place the Phantom here, teleport this up, just murder this thing. That could also make some sense to do, but what they did was certainly also a option that is perfectly viable. Kind of depends on what the rest of your game plan is here. And they went for a game plan where they debuff the opponent's entire board so that next turn they can kind of overwhelm them. Because this will probably just disease the sizzle here. Then these will like probably just hit something. They can't really run away because the only place they can move is like here and then maybe out here or something. That's not going to save them really, so they're probably just hitting a little bit and then dying, because this is probably being unfrozen next turn. And then this will obviously just murder these phobies, because it deals so much damage while on the stem. They actually try and move this away, which is pretty interesting. They do it a little bit incorrectly here, but whatever. This, like, Hematic should obviously have been one tile further up, because otherwise this gets unfrozen and just murders it. And the other phobies are just trying to be as defensive as possible. Their win condition at this point is, well, these are pretty much dead. So they are hoping to maybe get some disease on something with this. They really want to disease the Phantom more than anything. And then they are like hoping that this can steal a like important phobie. Like they maybe bring the Phantom out here and they yoink the Blondie or something like that. And maybe they can turn the game around. I think they would have had a lot better chance if they just kept the Smiley right here, diseased this thing, and then they put the Hematic here. Because that would make it a lot harder to kill all of their phobies here. As a matter of fact, they wouldn't be able to kill all of these, I don't believe. I don't think that would be enough damage for it. And this thing would also be on the clock then, which happens pretty quickly because this is disease damage to a dimensional. So it would die in 3 turns, maybe even 2 if it just takes a little bit of damage from something else. So I think they could have made their like chances of fighting on this side of the map a lot larger here, because what is probably going to happen is this will be unfrozen and then this will absolutely be like murdered here. So I mean, that's certainly what's going to happen. I have already watched the game, so I know that is something that will happen. And we just see them being completely murdered here. They don't even need to like kill them in this turn because like they're dealing 100 damage. Who cares? There's a healing spell on the map. You can just like heal that damage back in 1 turn if you want to. Like for each phobia, obviously. They would spread the damage out, but still. Now this is starting to move forward because this ability is coming up next turn for the Phantom. This will have to wait a turn more, but they are kind of forced to like make some form of movement here to do some fighting. These just have to try and run away. The dream is that somehow the Yeti gets to use the ability again, but it's never gonna happen. Because like now they're standing next to the enemy vault with these 2 phobies and they have the ability to summon a 2-key. So even like summoning a Corn would kill pretty much both of these essentially. You would need 1 more hit on the Hematic, but you can very easily kill them. If you even want to put in effort to do that, which you probably don't. because you can just kill them easily. You see a wall hit it. Makes sense, they just want this thing dead without having to summon a 2-key, because 1 keys have higher stats than 2 keys. So if you are in the end game, most of the time it's better to go for like 2 or 3 1 keys instead of a 2 or 3 key, depending on the scenario, of course, but often 1 keys are very good because they have high stats in that case. They are very obviously aiming to try and steal this. Like, that is the big objective here. Because if you can steal the Blondie and then maybe get a debuff on the entire enemy team, there might be some world where you can maybe win the fight. But what we instead see here is that the Phantom is dead. Very dead. And since the Phantom is now dead, that means that this has no options anymore on what it wants to steal. You can only really steal the Sizzle. Or the Dronia, I guess, but you're not gonna steal the Dronia over the Sizzle. So you're kind of forced to just steal the Sizzle here. And if you look at the border in that case, you realize stealing the Sizzle is not going to work out. Like, even if we said this wasn't a steal, but this was just the phobies on the board, they probably aren't able to win that, because they have to fight the Blondie somehow, and these phobies can't fight Blondie. They just straight up lose the Blondie every time. Especially when it has like 2 supportive phobies for it, and it's very hard to ever win that fight. And here we will just see a kill on the Sizzle, because that kind of makes the most sense, since it pulls it forward and then they can get a debuff off, which is pretty good. They get to debuff the Inoculus, making it way easier to deal with. And they also have the, what's it called, the shovel sitting back here with the ability up next turn to push this forward if they need to. An alternative play they could have done on that turn is that they could have actually killed the what's it called, Buffalo Will. I was about to call it the Willy Wonker, but they could have killed this turn if they really wanted to. Like, they could just walk up with the A-wall, hit this, and then teleport it up here and kill it, if that was like what they really wanted to do. And that would be a perfectly fine option if they opted for that, I think, at least. They would be taking some damage from the Inoculus, but the Inoculus can't stay around, so they would only take 1 hit, and it wouldn't really matter. The advantage to that play is that this Sizzle will eventually become your own again, so you can kind of just let your phobies tank the Sizzle, and then it's all of these phobies against these 2, which is a very safe bet, obviously. But either way, you're probably winning the game, right? But they could have like taken the Phantom, placed it over here, teleported the Blondie up to this space, killed this with the A-wall and 2 hits from the Blondie, and then they could have put their shovel down here, or they could have put it here, whatever. Could probably even have moved it up here if they wanted to, had it sit here, because they would still be able to push the Blondie in that case, if they really needed to. Then they would just need to put a phobia on the side of it, but that would have been a pretty good play. And again, this can only hit you once if you do that play. And the reason for that is because if it stays around here, then you just shove your Blondie here, move here, and then kill this. And then they have a Jin Sting left, and this is coming back to you on the following turn. I'm guessing they wanted to kill this, both because of the big debuff play, but also just because this deals a ton of damage if you let it hit your phobies. So waiting on this one to turn back into your own phobie is a little bit scary, I guess. As I said though, either option is probably going to win you the game here, so it doesn't really matter which one you opt for. I would probably have killed the Willy or the Buffalo Will here, just because, like, if you take that out of the equation, you are 100% certain to always win this game. There's no weird scenario where this flees and then somehow turns on you or something. Not that I think that would ever really happen here anyway, unless you like completely screw the board up somehow. But that is probably what I think I would have done. Both plays are completely viable. And we also get the cowbell here. At that point, the one key they summon doesn't really matter that much. The advantage of this play is that this is still in range of killing the Inoculus very easily, and you're going close to the opponent's heart in case they try and flee, and they're debuffed, so you don't really have to care about the damage that they might deal. But like I said, both plays probably end up with the exact same thing happening. Here we just see a bunch of hits. They obviously don't have to care about Zafry's damage at all, because only the Jin Sting can deal damage. And if it stays here, it's dead. So the game is over by now. This is just like watching the final turns. And I guess Zafry surrendered here. Yeah, they did. So that game was pretty over at that point, but I think it was a very interesting game. You got to see, obviously, phantoms dancing with each other, which is a very common thing in high ranks. You often see them kind of like move around the map and try and bully each other without ever really getting close. Because if one gets too close, then it instantly dies or gets affected by whatever like the opponent is playing for. And we also got to see it with some of the phobies they can work really well with. I would recommend it with Blondie and Kaboom. I don't think Waffalo Will is that great of an option. It can win you games, but it is kind of like a meme thing. And the Smiley I also think is better with the shovel, like I mentioned during the game. But you still got to see some pretty good things there. You also saw that they started out with openers that were like Jin Sting and one key into a Hematic. That is a very common thing to do on this map. You go for those like very good like mobile fighters early on, and then you decide to either go for like some kind of combo path, or you go aggressive and you kind of just kill the opponent very, very fast with like Spidolas or flying things such as Morty and some Murder Wings. Just something aggressive. Maybe you bring Noxious because it works well with the stim pad. You could do something like that, or you can do the big combos. I think the strongest strategy on that map is probably Doc Holiday, to be honest. But Phantom is always going to be very powerful and a very big threat as long as it can bring in either Kaboom or Blondie or some other huge like turn thing where you can just completely change the state of the game in one turn. Anything like that just works really well with Phantom. Anyway, that was all I had for this one. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.